Welcome to Uncle Jimmy's podcast. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the conversation.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Welcome into Uncle Jimmy's podcast. Today on the show, we're joined by someone who has stepped into the arena long before most people his age even consider it. Matthew Henry, a Georgetown alum, TEDx speaker, and author of Working Together, Why We Need Bipartisanship in American Politics, has spent years interviewing political leaders, everyday citizens, and thinkers across the ideological spectrum to answer a deceptively simple question: why can't America get along? In a moment when political division feels like the air we breathe, Matthew challenges us to rethink our assumptions, reevaluate how we communicate, and reconsider what genuine civic participation looks like. His work blends political curiosity, global perspective, and a fearless willingness to listen. Matthew isn't just analyzing politics. He's trying to rebuild the civic muscles we've allowed to atrophy. And whether you agree with him or not, he's pushing the conversation forward in a time when too many people are content to shout from the sidelines. Matthew, welcome to the podcast. I'm excited for this conversation.
Thank you for that introduction. I got to say, I might have to have that as my voicemail. That is fantastic. Man, thank you so much.
No problem. I can even record it for you. I can record that and just snip it and send it right over to you. I'd be like, who's this Matthew they're talking about? Who's this guy, So introduce yourself to the listeners and tell us a little bit about what you do, where you came from, where you went to college. We know that from the introduction, but let people know about the book, and then we'll get into some questions after that. And, this may be, a 3-hour podcast because we're going to talk politics, and that's one of the biggest things this season. I said season 2, we weren't going to talk politics, but here we are.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you for having me. And, I would like to start off with my failures. First, community college was not a failure, but I was not a good student in high school. And even in community college, I was really struggling. But what I did was it was the concept of grit, and just to keep on persevering. Quitting and failure does not register.
Yeah.
I just noticed, I don't want to have that vocabulary in my mind. And it's just about opportunity. So as you're continuing to grind, continuing to get that grit on, opportunities will land in your lap. And I had the opportunity to apply to Georgetown. I said, why not? And I applied, and I started from the bottom though at Georgetown. I was like, hey, we'll get you on almost academic probation immediately. And, let's see if you can even handle this curriculum. So long story short, I started from there. I had the opportunity to write a book while I was in Georgetown, and I had 3 topics. And I actually wrote another book on dating and self-love, but I was going to write that first. I was going to write another book on international affairs, and then the last one was politics. And I was like, oh man, writing about politics, that's so intimidating. But you know what? I was taking class from Madeleine Albright at the time, and I figured, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. The same way that you don't want to quit, you don't believe in failure. Well, you got to go after it. F it. Just let's see what happens. And that ended up being one of the most important decisions and best decisions of my life.
Yeah.
Because it changes everything. I was not an author, I was not a writer, but it's just taking on a new challenge.
Yeah.
And then through writing a book about politics, and as we talked about earlier, screw the politicians. The blandest interviews that, I would ask them, I thought pretty decent questions. Again, their answers were so manufactured. You knew what they were going to say before they even said it.
Yeah.
And okay, this is boring. So I interviewed everybody. I interviewed Trump supporters. I interviewed at the time, Obama, and it escapes me. Who was running at the time? I guess, Hillary Clinton. Yeah. Whoever it was, I'll interview. And again, as we've spoken about before, people want just a simple thing. That is to take care of the family, be able to pay for the kids' college, be able to go on vacation every now and then, take care of the wife or husband.
Yeah.
It's
the simple
just,
things.
Just simple things, right?
Yeah.
And I said in the book, the most important color in this country is green, and that's money.
Money.
That's right. It doesn't matter what race you like. If you have the money, then that is like, it really, I know racism and all that does exist. It really does. But, again, money just it's like a pillow against so much.
Yeah.
But at the same time, who has access to that money, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's where the conversation needs to really be of like, okay, how can we help all Americans?
All Americans. Exactly. Yeah.
And so the lens of not only this book, but even pushing things forward is, let's look at all of our problems through a problem solving lens. Forget Democrat, forget Republican. How would you fix it? Right? How would you fix the fiscal crisis? How would you fix, the mortgage crisis or whatever it may be,
Yeah.
whatever issue? How would you fix just for like, we're a group of people, how can we just come together? But we need intellectual diversity,
Yeah.
right? We really need intellectual diversity. We need to hear from everybody, not just, I don't think we would want 12 years or 12 to 16 years of just Democrats or 12 to 16 years of just Republicans.
Exactly.
So we have to work together.
And I think one of the things that you said is that the great thing about the book is it's just not skewed with Republican coverage or Democrat coverage. It's everybody. Everybody's, you interviewed everybody, getting everybody's fair take, everybody's perspective on what's going on. One of the biggest things I love is like you said, you could have easily have just said, hey, I'm just going to pick Republicans to interview, or I'm just going to pick Democrats. You got everybody. Everybody's involved,
Mhm.
and that's more of what we got to do in politics. We got to get everybody involved.
Exactly.
And the
Yeah.
first thing we got to do, though, as a country, is we have to start listening to one another.
Mhm. Absolutely. And you can tell, especially on a lot of political shows, that they're hearing, but they're not listening. They they're hearing the opposite side talk, but they got their thoughts locked in a chamber and they're just ready. They're
Yeah.
ready. They're like, we got this. It's like, no, we have to really listen, and then we have to come up with like new conversations.
Exactly. Well, we have to listen. We have to digest it. Then we have to have the conversation. A couple weeks ago, I stopped watching, like CNN, Fox, and all those. For the simple fact is, I forget I think it was CNN, and they always have like a couple Trump guys on, couple Democrat guys on, or girls, and it was just like no one could have a conversation. It was once the Democrats started, the guys on the Republican started screaming and yelling, "Oh, it's a lie! That's this!" And then when the Republican side started, nobody's listening. And I'm like, to the host, I feel bad because I'm like, this poor lady, like, she's not even having a conversation. Like, but that's the big thing. I think people need to sit back, listen, digest it, and actually have an open and honest conversation with dialogue, not just you suck because you're a Democrat or you suck because you're a Republican, because we need to stop fighting with each other,
Yeah. And
get
I would
along.
urge a lot of people to, from the very beginning, to not like self-subscribe to a political party.
Yeah,
Don't subscribe to anyone yet. Just figure out what issues really matter to you, and then figure out a way in which you would how to solve it, or ways that you could participate. How would you get your friends involved, right? And because these political entities, who knows what they most likely will not take care of the issue. As a private citizen, you most likely could take care of it better than a politician.
then a politician, exactly.
So I just feel like we have so much more power than the politicians. Because at the end of the day, they're asking for our money.
Exactly. Yeah. And if we stop giving it to them, then where are they going to be?
It's like, you know what? I'm not going to donate to you. I'm going to donate to a charity. I'm going to donate to, like,
Yeah.
I'd rather do that. I'd rather give that money to a hospital than,
Exactly. And that's the crazy thing, right? It was billions of dollars on the 2020 campaign. And it's like, couldn't we just take that money, right? And just let's fix some issues in the country. Let's give it to a charity, give it to a hospital, give it to something that can be used for, not, okay, 40-second clips on, CNN, or 40-second clips on this news. I know people hate it when election season comes around because it's like, I don't know about you guys down there on TV. It's like political ad after political ad after
oh, brutal.
It's like, and one of the biggest things people don't realize is the dark money in politics right now.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like
Oh, man.
it's
Speaking of that,
so crazy.
speaking of the commercials, there's one commercial because we just had a governor race not too long ago. And then again, it's escaping my mind, but the Republican nominee, her tagline was, I am speaking. It was all over. It was in my head. It was ingrained in my head just
Yeah.
because they're trying to make the image rather negative. And then, this candidate had like a moment and it was just like that catchphrase was just right there all the time, bombarded. And we're just so fatigued. We're like, you know what? I can't wait till this is over.
Yeah. Well, that's like the crazy thing in New York right now. Like people are up in arms that Mondani won. And I'm like, well, how are you guys all upset? Like he ran. The people in New York voted for him. Let's give him a friggin' chance. He hasn't
Yeah.
even started yet. you know? It's just like, all right, people like, I'm moving out of the city. I'm doing this. He's the man now. And okay, give him a chance. So, one of the biggest things for me too is like, it's like with Trump, right? I tried to in the beginning in 2020, 2024 when he won, to basically be like, hey, everyone on social media, let's give him a chance, right? And
Yeah.
I literally, like, a month in, it was like I put my foot in my mouth 30 days because it was something new every day with him, because I'm all for, hey, he won. He won the election, And one of my hottest things is to wrap my head around is, as a country, as a society, right? I like to think like you're probably never going to see the days of like an average American being president again. The common man, you're never going to see it because politics has become almost like a rich man's and rich woman's sport almost per se, right?
Oh,
So you'll never see the common man, which kills me because it's like, okay, take Kamala Harris, right, to Trump. To me, someone that's, out there working 60 to 80 hours a week, doing the union work, doing, the work on the railroad, who has my best interests at heart? The billionaire or someone that's, worked some real jobs, Kamala Harris, who was, the district attorney and all that in California and worked her way up, attorney general, all that stuff. Or Trump, who's just been, so it's like, I don't know where people got that connection to Trump where it's like, I'm going to give him, everything is is like a grift almost where it's like, I'm going to sell watches. I'm going to sell cologne. I'm going to sell, it's like, you're the president. Like,
yeah. Like, what are you
imagine if
doing?
Imagine if Obama was selling cologne.
Oh my gosh. Hope. Can you imagine that? Hope
Yeah,
the fragrance.
he'd be losing it, But it's like his base is like they sort of try to find a way around it when he does something wrong. They don't own it. They just make excuses for him. And I think that's sort of like the big thing with Trump is, yes, he's a multi-billionaire and he's never been told no, right?
Yeah.
He's never been,
really hasn't.
his feet's never been held to the fire by anybody because he doesn't have to. He's a billionaire. He don't care. He runs on his own time. He runs on his own platform, So I think what we need to do as a nation, and if you are a Trump supporter or you're a Democrat or an independent, let's start holding these politicians' feet to the fire. Do the right thing,
Yeah, because they're taking our money. We voted for them, and it's a public service.
Exactly.
You're there to serve. They're there to serve us, right?
To serve the constituents. Exactly.
We're not serving them.
No.
Like they should be working 24 hours. They should be working Christmas. They should be, it's like, it's not, it shouldn't be like a glorious job where, when you get the title of president, like, oh, you go to a nice restaurant. Oh, here you go, Mr. President, reservation for you. Like, no, you should be in the office. You should be just getting that grind on.
Taking care of things, especially the way that the state of the country, the way that our country's in right now, there's so much that they could be doing. But it's like Trump wants to go golf and I know a lot of people weren't, fan favorites of Biden, but my biggest thing is, and the hottest part for me about Biden was, there you have a man who dedicated his life to this country, right? And at the tail end of his career, the Democratic Party comes to him and says, we need you, Joe. We need you, right? And what does he do? All right, I'll do it. And then what does the Democratic Party do? Once they're done with him 4 years later and he doesn't serve a need to them, they boot his ass out the door, I was a firm believer. They should have just let him run in 2024. Just let him run. If he lost, he lost.
I'll never forget that debate. I will never forget
Oh, it was crazy. Crazy. Who in their right mind on Biden's team sent him out there?
Yeah.
It's similar to Trump too. It's like with Trump's team, it's like, both of them, even Trump now as president, they should give him his script and say, once you're done, have someone go over, grab him and get the hell off the stage. You don't need to blabber and go on and on and on. Just think about, like you said, that debate, like that was the end of it.
That was
the end of Biden,
It was, I wrote in my notes on my phone after watching that debate, I was like, this is a dark day for America. That was that was not only embarrassing, that was really dark.
Yeah.
To see the president at the time essentially say, I think he killed Medicaid or
exactly. Yeah. And it's like, and that gets to the point of, when is, you can't go with an age limit because for the simple fact is that to me, that ruins election integrity because anybody at any age should be able to run, but I think as a nation, we have young leaders, we have young people that are coming up. I'm a big fan. I love Cory Booker. Cory Booker is one of my favorites, but he doesn't have that national media, national attention that he should. But everybody's in love with, what's his name? The governor Newsom. you know?
Yeah, Gavin Newsom, yeah.
But I tell people,
And
look into his background, see where he comes from, wealthy friends, Silicon Valley. He's not one of us, like,
yeah, it's funny, like they do like the rolled up sleeves and like they're trying to create this image that, oh yeah, we're part of the working man. Like, oh, you really? Let me see those hands. Are they nice and clean? Oh,
soft baby hands,
they haven't done anything, right? And here's the thing, like, how are they gonna really how are they gonna feel? And that's the thing, right? They can say all they want, but like, can they feel the pain that the average American is feeling? Right? Do they know what it's like to really be low on your bills?
Yeah. Yeah. Think about it
And
now with groceries. Think about some families now with the holidays coming up, right? Think about the family now that's putting away that, big turkey and getting one that's probably, a couple pounds lighter. They're getting less food because they don't have the money, or making that decision of, hey, we're going to keep the lights on, or are we going to, put food on the table, because
yeah,
it's dire right now. Trump ran on lowering everything, and it seems to me everything's going up, up, up. And I don't just blame him. He's the figurehead. He's the big boss. But it's those in power, those Republicans and Democrats in Congress. I'm a big believer of, I don't know if you saw, I think it was Casey, I think from Pennsylvania, maybe. I forget where, but he was talking about greedflation,
mm,
where all these companies are just so greedy, when it comes to supermarkets and all that. And they've jacked up their prices because they can get away with it, and nobody's
yeah.
holding them accountable.
It's like a new kind of monopoly, you
Yeah,
know?
and nobody's holding them accountable.
And it's really messed up. And now these bigger companies are relying on AI,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
By relying over like heavily on AI, they are now reducing the workforce. So now you have rising prices in addition to unemployment.
yeah,
So what is the rest? What is now going to happen? You have people who can't afford, and now they can't pay their bills because they don't have a job,
yeah.
right? And this is going to be a recipe for disaster. And what I'm worried about is, we're 3.5 years in, and if more people are going to lose their jobs due to AI or due to this corporate greed, I mean, we're looking
Where are we
at
going to
like,
be?
yeah,
Where are we going to
amazing.
be at the end of his term?
People have to. Everybody needs to eat.
Yeah,
Literally, everyone needs
yeah.
to eat.
It's a human right. It's a basic human right.
So it's but at the same time, I think, especially what you're doing right now, talking to people, that is one of the remedies in terms of trying to find a solution because you know what? Forget them. By the time we get our questions to the politicians, it's going to be 3 years will be done. By the
Well, by the
time,
time they get the questions, it's going to be watered down bullshit. The same generic answer. I mean, but that's what I love about when we go to DC is that we actually get an audience with them and to sit in front of them and talk to them. It can
Mhm.
be, we had one from about my first visit ever to DC almost 11 years ago, I believe. We had a congressman from Rhode Island, David Cicilline, who's no longer there. He left and retired, and he's doing private work down in Rhode Island now. But we were talking about kids not going to college and what's the alternative. And he said, I'm a firm believer of we have to get back with more trade schools, trade high schools.
Oh, absolutely,
You know,
absolutely,
and it's like that
yes.
was 11 years ago, and here we are, and there's still no change with that. There's still no, it's okay for kids to realize, hey, I'm not going to college. Why am I going to go for a year or two and waste 120,000 when I can get into the workforce right away with a trade, with get into the industry? Why not? I mean,
Oh yeah.
you probably see it down there all the time being in Georgetown,
Mhm.
politics, politics, politics,
Right now, I'm working on my third book, and that's about it's twofold. It's about public speaking, but also helping the future generation, high school students with college admissions.
Oh,
And what I'm trying to advocate for a lot of students is take a gap year and figure out like you don't have to go to college, but like, take a look at welding, for example, or if you want to be an electrician. Even one of my best friends, Frankie, he's a plumber. He's been a plumber for over 12 years,
everyone needs
and
a plumber.
yeah, he's gonna have a. It's funny. His family actually owns a plumbing company, and their motto a couple years ago was "Your shit is our bread and butter."
And it's
I'll
crazy
never forget,
because
I'm
it's
like,
like, I think it's like
wow,
$250 just to get a plumber out,
yeah.
you know?
And you're always gonna need a plumber. You're always gonna
Always
need
gonna need a plumber, always gonna
always
need an
gonna need
electrician.
welding. Like so. I feel like there is opportunity, and we need more of those. We need, but we also have to encourage it. And I think a big problem that I had when I was in high school was like being sort of force fed college,
That you have to go.
and I was like, but it's that tens of thousands of dollars, and if you're not in the top, 10 to 20% in America, you got to take out loans. And the interest on these loans, we're not talking 2 to 3%, we're talking 8 to 9%.
Yeah.
And a big issue that's happening is when you're paying off these loans, you're just paying off the interest.
Interest, exactly. Yeah. And you're still paying them 20 years later.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so and then on top, so you're coming out of college with all this massive debt, and now you want to start a family, right? Think about the average cost of a wedding, and then even just having a child, and then
Yeah.
the price of daycare and schooling and all that. So
Price
again,
of a canister of formula.
yeah,
And it's just for the average American right now, I feel like that, the gap, right, between the rich and the middle class and the poor, I think the rich is growing, right? But the middle class is also dropping. Where almost that elimination of the middle class, where it's just going to be basically the rich or the poor.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, actually earlier, if you think about $1 billion, right, that's 1,000,000,000. Right? And I understand, people just like own stocks or whatever, but no one needs that much. I mean, I'm not trying to sound like, oh yeah, disperse all of that, but
Hey.
like, just who needs 1,000,000,000? That's crazy.
What do you
1,000
do with
million, then you got multi-billionaires. So it's like, dude, forget a million. Just like, and imagine like an extra 20 grand in your pocket.
Yeah.
Life changing.
Yeah. Life changing. Yeah. Yeah.
So like, let's find a way to get that kind of money. We don't have to make everyone millionaires, but give the average American a couple grand more.
Yeah. Give them a little break,
Give them a little break.
Yeah.
They've been through a lot of shit. Like, let's find a way to get them money.
And we're not talking about those stupid Trump checks that he promised everybody, 2,000 from the tariffs. And then, they switched it up and said, no, well, only if you make less than 100,000, you're going to get one. And it's like, when are they going to come out? Well, they're not going to come out maybe till the middle of next year. And it's like, no, let's get some solutions, some real solutions, right? That can
Mhm.
actually help the average American that needs it.
Exactly. And how can we get the average American to sort of generate extra revenue, right? It's almost like they can accumulate their own interest. That way, like they can how can the average American make money when they're sleeping?
Yeah.
Not just the billionaire hedge fund managers, like how can the average American be like, hey, you know what? As I'm sleeping and playing with my kid, making some money
Yeah.
to pay for college, or I'm making some money to go on vacation to Hawaii or something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
we got to find, like, I want the average American that have money.
Yeah.
make
And they
people happy.
shouldn't have to work. The average American shouldn't have to work 80 hours a week to pay the bills. An average American shouldn't have to go to 2 jobs a week, and I think the hottest part now with, families around this country is that you don't have the like old school way of, mom's home, dad's at work. When you get in, mom's home. Nowadays it's when you get home, there may be nobody. Maybe grandma's there, maybe, great aunt's there because mom and dad are at work because both parents
Yeah.
are at work,
Yeah.
And it's like the old school way of doing things where mom could stay home and look, I can only imagine, my ex-girlfriend had, 5 kids, and I can only imagine the job of a mother raising 5 kids. It's tough, 5 kids, and you gotta meet their needs. You gotta cook, you gotta clean, you gotta change them, you gotta do all that. Being a stay-at-home mom doesn't mean that, a stay-at-home mom's not doing anything. No, a stay-at-home mom's doing a lot of work,
Yeah.
not, to making sure her family's taken care of. But now you've removed that from the common family because both of them have to work to pay the bills, And I'm not talking
And
about
that's
something extraordinary where they live in $1 million house and drive a Mercedes Benz. I'm talking about, no, there may be friggin' a small little house with 2 bedrooms, 2008 Jeep Wrangler in the friggin' driveway, and they're just barely making it,
yeah. And I gotta also echo that too. Like, being a I mean, I can't even imagine. That's got to be the hardest job, because especially with kids, you leave them alone for 5 seconds, and suddenly they're like, oh no, they're playing with a knife or something.
Hey.
I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like,
Now, do you have
it's
any
like
kids?
constant monitoring.
You have any kids?
No, I
Oh.
don't. I've only like babysitted, but like even then, you're just thinking, even though it's someone else's kids, still
Yeah.
like any moment they could like wander off and like
Yeah.
they could start eating a pen. Like, oh, whoa, whoa, what
See,
are you
I'm the
doing?
same way. I got no kids. I got no kids either. So, but I've been fortunate enough with that's why it's Uncle Jimmy's podcast. I'm sort of like the Uncle Buck. I love to have fun, and they come to Uncle Jimmy for everything. My 2 nephews and my niece, and I got a lot of cousins. So, but I got no kids. But exactly same thing, like babysitting or watching some smaller
I
children.
love that.
You know,
I love kids. I like, I'm also in the same boat too. Like, I'm like,
Yeah.
almost like an uncle sort of position,
Yeah, yeah.
and it's great.
It's
I
great.
like it.
Yeah, yeah. I just
Not
love,
gonna lie,
you can go have all the
we-
fun with them, you can do all that, but then you can give them back.
like I'm not paid for 7. Actually, had two of my closest, two of my best friends, Nick and Connie. They just had their first kid not too long ago. Name is
Awesome.
Caden, and I'm wondering how they're doing because I wonder if they're like just getting used to the schedule because
They're probably
what I've
super
heard is
busy.
that yeah,
Yeah.
it's they can just wake up at any time, and I want to hope this well.
Feeding them, and one parent has to be up, so it's like who got to go to work in the morning or who has the day off. It's so tough. And like I said, just imagine being that mom, right? Where now it's like you got to get up. Say you have 2 kids at home, you got to get them up in the morning. You got to get their lunches ready for school. You got to get them out the door. You got to get yourself ready now. You got to get yourself ready for work. It's like it's a full-time job. But where in America do we lose that whole, like you said, the biggest thing is money, right? Is money drives
Mm.
everything nowadays, And it's like, to me, I always say, like, I feel like even just walking out the front door costs me money nowadays. You know what I mean?
Immediately just like change, just like flies, like oh no,
Yeah, it's like, like if I was in New York and one of the things was like I got hit with this toll and that toll and this toll, and I'm like, I'm just taking the train next time I come down. I literally just opened my mail from a couple weeks ago. I was down there and it's like $23 for this toll, $13 for this toll, $33 for this toll. I'm like, where the hell did I go through all these tolls? So let's get
last I visited Boston once. I went to visit Harvard.
okay.
And it was I mean, I enjoyed Boston because I liked they call it the T, right?
Yeah.
And it was I think it was they had fixed pricing.
Yeah.
And that was so much easier than the metro. I mean, I liked it better than the metro because the
Hey,
metro basically if it's like high traffic hour, that could be, $7 to $9. When I was using the T, I believe it was like 4. I'm like, this is it? I have to go
yeah.
to the airport. You
Yeah.
have to go to the airport. Like, no, it's Harvard Square. This
Yeah.
is great.
Or cheap. Back in the day, you just throw a token in. They had these tokens that you just throw in, and it was like $1.25 or 75 cents back in the day. But we have I think we're the oldest subway in the country. I think we were one of the first. I think
Oh.
we were the first one built. Yeah, Park Street, I believe. I could be wrong, but yeah. But we have the green line, the purple. We have every line you can imagine. Any way you need to get around in the city, there's the MBTA. They do great work. Those guys and girls over there that run that operation. It
Oh yeah,
adds to
fantastic.
being a world class city.
I really yeah, I really enjoyed it, and it was funny because, they're like, "Oh, where are you from?" Like, "Oh, yeah, I'm from, DC area," like, and then we're just, like, talking smack about New York. I was like, "Oh, they're great," a lot of hospitality, great food.
Yeah, every ethnicity you can think of, food, and then I'm in Dorchester, which is in Boston, but we're the most diverse part of Boston, the neighborhood I come from. We have
Okay,
everybody,
okay.
and we just here in Boston, I wasn't around in the '70s and stuff when they said there was a lot of racism and stuff in the city. I didn't experience that. I was born in '84, so but the city
Mhm.
I grew up in, I had black friends, I had Asian friends, I had friends of every faith, every religion. We grew up with everybody, and it
Yeah.
was just one of the best upbringings growing up here in Dorchester, politics wise, friends wise, neighborhood wise. Boston's a solid city. We stand strong on politics. One of the biggest things I love about this city is that when something happens, we all come together.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And I think especially with diversity, it's not you shouldn't have diversity to meet a quota. Diversity is about the benefit of having diversity is not only new perspectives, but just amazing cultures, amazing
yeah,
food. You learn a lot about yourself
yeah.
just by getting exposed to these different
To those
cultures.
different
And
countries, yeah.
yeah, learn
And
a lot.
and to think that anybody would be upset because, oh, this guy's Mexican or this guy's, from, let's say Pakistan or wherever it may be, right? Just think
Mhm.
about it. At one point in time, unless you're Native American, your family, my family, made the trip from Ireland and Poland, where we came from, to come to this country, and that's what
Yeah.
makes this country great. We're a nation of immigrants. This country.
Hmm. We are united immigrants.
No doubt about it. And that's what I'm not saying, oh, we need to go back to that, but that's what this country's built off of, right? And now you have so much hate for immigrants in this country because the man at top, the president wants to come out and talk about nonsense about, look, I'm all for him deporting the worst of the worst, right? all for them. When you go into a local car wash over here in Alston and deport 9 workers who have no criminal records, but they overstayed their visas, that's bullshit. Round them up and treat them like criminals. They're productive citizens. They're working. A lot of people don't understand. A lot of these, immigrants that are here that overstayed their visas, they're paying taxes too. People don't realize that. They all think everybody, the misconception I think the media and the president has done is that they want you to think that every immigrant that's here is here, number one, illegally, and number two, if they are here illegally, they're just draining the system of all this money.
They're greedy and it's like, no, they're not. They're actually barely getting by.
Exactly. And I don't know if you saw Trump like a couple months back when he was on this kick of deporting all the illegal immigrants, when all of a sudden he came out one day and he was like, well, we can't deport the farmers and we can't deport the hotel workers because nobody wants to do that job. And when it's like, now you want to keep some of them, let's come to a path for amnesty. Let's come to a path for citizenship. Let's do it the right way. If they're here and they're productive and they're working, you can stay. But if you're here committing crimes and murdering and raping, you got to go. You got to go to jail first. And then when that's done, you're going back to your country. I'm all for that.
Instead of the administration is grouping everyone together.
Exactly.
You've got murderers, pedophiles, but also people who haven't done anything wrong in their life.
Yeah.
Now they're working their ass off and they're getting grouped in. And then now there have been instances where they're being sent to these extremely hostile prisons
and countries.
Yeah.
Like different countries they're shipping them to, not even their country of origin. It's like,
I don't even think they're getting them back. I mean, if they, so they're, they're stuck in El Salvador,
They showed a guy, right, who was born on a military base and he was in this country and they shipped him back to it. And he said, I got to go back. I've never been there in my life, and they shipped him back. And like you said, the hardest part for me is you're grouping them all together, right? But I think that's part of, unfortunately, the administration's playbook to get his supporters so upset and to think that all immigrants are like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
that they're all criminals, that they're all bad, but they're not. 98% of them have only, overstayed their visa, and probably 2% of them, maybe even less than that, are real criminals, bad. We'll ship them back. People forget Obama deported more than 3.5 million illegal immigrants. People don't talk about that.
He deported, I think, more than Trump did.
Trump did, exactly.
Yeah.
But nobody talks about that.
Yeah, it wasn't going to,
because he did it the right way.
Then, it was done quietly.
Done quietly, but also done the right way of getting the real bad people out. They didn't go in and overturn a friggin' supermarket looking for them all, because that's not what you do. They're here, they're working, okay, they're productive, they can stay. But the ones that are murderers, rapists, criminals, they're going back,
Now they're making it's almost like a crime to be brown, or, it's...
Yeah.
It's really terrifying. It's like you got to carry your passport with you.
It's almost, back to, like, they always talk about, like, the Gestapo. Back in the day, you had to carry your papers, and it's like, there was so many stories you hear of Americans that get rounded up and they end up in jail. They stay 3 or 4 days, then they let them out, and it's like, but I'm a citizen of this country because I was, dark skinned. You took me in. Now I got to do 4 days in prison for what? And they don't think of the ramifications, right? Okay. Say you get picked up on a Monday, you get rounded up on one of those, and you're a regular person. You're an American. 4 days, right? You go to jail. You could lose your job.
Yeah.
Oh, I was in jail. Oh, you didn't call? No, I was in jail. I couldn't call. So some places, 4 days in a row where you miss, you could be fired for.
And what are you gonna, and again, with the cost of everything now, it's like a cycle of, it's a very poisonous cycle.
Yeah.
Right. And we're only a few months in. Right. And
scary.
When I've talked to people, I don't like, especially like the old school Republicans, they're like, they don't know what this is. Like MAGA has become like this own entity and has even like, for example, Make America Great Again. That is not, Trump didn't come up with that. I believe it was Reagan who
did.
Make America Great Again.
Yeah, another thing he just stole.
Yeah, it's not even his.
It's not even his. And the hottest part for me becomes, with Trump, when let's make America great again, right? You tell me one day, Donnie Trump, when America wasn't the greatest for you. Because every day you've lived in this country, it's been the greatest fucking country that you've ever lived in your life. Being a millionaire, multi-billionaire, you ain't got nothing to worry about. What do you mean, let's make it again? Let's make it great again. What are you trying to make great? You live in the friggin' greatest buildings. You have the greatest friggin' golf courses, as you say. Greatest food. What do you want to make great? For who? Because you're not making great for everyday, modern day, everyday citizens of this country, people that are between the, barely making it to, let's take the light bill and put it on groceries because we don't have it. Those people that are suffering right now, you haven't lowered prices, you haven't lowered gas prices, you haven't lowered food prices. What are we doing?
Yeah. And it's almost like this Trump 2.0, because I remember I was comparing his administration now to his administration, this the first time.
The first time.
I think with the 2025, he had like this playbook. It's escaping the name, but there was like this playbook before while he was running,
Project
and
2025. And it's all
and
coming to fruition.
it's all happening. It's
Yeah.
literally right there.
And he said, I have nothing to do with it. I don't know anything about it. And then the guy that wrote it was in the White House, like and he might have been working on some new policy recently. And it's like, oh, I know him. And it's like, you just told us 16 months ago, you didn't have a clue who the guy was and he never worked. You didn't know what Project 2025 was. So it's like,
Yeah, I think one of the architects is like the head of the FCC, if I'm
one of those. Yeah.
one of the architects of it.
And I don't
It's
want people to think we're sitting here and we're bashing the president, right? We're just bashing an administration right now because unfortunately that's who the administration is, and we're not happy with what they're doing. But as an
Yeah.
American, right, we have the right to practice our freedom of speech and say how we feel. We're not sitting here advocating any violence or anything. We're just saying we don't agree with them. But some of the ways we can make that change is next elections when they come, whether it's presidential, whether it's local, state, federal level politics. Get involved, people. Get involved.
And also, if this was a Democrat-run administration, they would get the same.
No,
I
they're
believe
not.
they're both getting their feet to the fire.
Yeah.
We got to hold them both accountable, regardless,
And
right?
I think I think that's the big thing. Like you said, we have to start, whether it's Republicans and Democrats, holding everybody's feet to the fire that is a senator, that is in the House of Representatives, that's in the White House, that are policymakers, that are decision makers in DC. We have to
Mhm.
hold all their feet to the fire, and not just today, right? Because Trump's president. We're talking about from here on out, every day of every administration of every president. If you're doing wrong, or you're doing wrong by the American people, or right by the American people, because some people will still hold your feet to the fire when you're doing right. We need to hold their feet to the fire and hold them accountable. Both parties,
I remember during the Biden administration, there would be, influencers on TikTok, and then they would talk about Biden as if he's done, everything's a-okay, nothing's going wrong. And it's like, no, you got to also things are not always okay.
Yeah.
Things aren't as bad now, but things weren't also perfect. It was still hard to find employment for a lot of people. It was still like prices were still high. Like, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
we gotta be fair as possible, and be
Yeah.
like, okay, like,
Look at the
let's
last couple
talk
months
about
of Biden's presidency with the eggs. The eggs were like $7 a carton,
Oh, yeah,
So it's not
and
just Trump, it's not just Biden, it's all politics. But I think we need to start focusing more on, the bipartisanship of it.
yeah, and that is we have to, and
Yeah.
going back to, my book really
book.
is we have to work together, right? Because we're gonna have this, this exchange, right? 4 years of one party, then 4 years of another party. I don't believe it's been a while since we've had 3 consecutive administrations of one party.
Of one
It's
party, yeah.
been a very long time since that
Yeah.
happened. And again, we don't want one party dominating for the next 16 years. That would be, that'd be a lot. Disagreement is good. Disagreement is good, but it's also so is compromise. So is being compassionate, and also forgiveness. Forgiving not only the people on the other side, but forgiving ourselves, right? And
Exactly.
bring up to our own flaws.
Yeah.
And we have to come to an honest conversation about how difficult it is, as long as it's as respectful as possible, because we're trying to, again, really problem solve,
Yeah.
right? We're a very intelligent country. We have the best universities in the world, and even if people didn't go to university, they're still hyper intelligent. I've met some of the smartest people who were living in construction.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
When someone has life experience, you don't need a diploma,
No.
right? When someone been through so much life experience, that is, to me, is way more valuable. I would rather talk to someone who is 55 years old than someone who went to MIT and Harvard but is like 25.
Yeah.
I'll take 55-year-old, because that's a wealth of knowledge. That's a wealth of just I
55
can
years of experience,
yeah, and that's way more important.
Exactly. When they can probably talk to you about, the way it was when they were a kid growing up, the way it was when they were in their 20s, their 30s, their 40s, and now, because we've seen that change, in not just in politics, but in the country itself, where we've gone a shift away from, we've shifted away from looking out for each other, looking out for our neighbors, to only looking out for ourselves.
Yeah.
Essentially, we've become a very
Yeah.
selfish nation and just worried about ourselves. And, I remember being a kid, like my mom would send me next door and be like, "Hey, go get a cup of flour or go get a cup of milk from the neighbor." And I couldn't imagine doing that nowadays. I don't even know my neighbors really, like,
Mhm.
my neighbors to the left and right where I live now is where my father grew up in my grandmother's house. I could definitely do that here, but when I was living up the street in the same neighborhood, I didn't know my neighbors. I couldn't go do that,
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's
Um,
get into some questions about on the book, right?
absolutely.
So your book argues for bipartisanship at a time when many Americans believe the other side is a threat to democracy.
Mhm.
Why do you still think bipartisanship is worth fighting for?
I mean, simply, and that is, we really have no choice, but we have to work together, right? Because 4 years from now, I mean, I'm sort of making an estimation, but it is most likely going to be the Democrats who are going to win the presidency
Yeah.
based on recent government elections for governor. And what I'm guessing is next year's elections for, I believe, the Senate. And I think the Democrats are going to have a pretty successful next couple elections.
Unless something drastically happens with, on, things that are going on with the current administration, I do see, the Democrats winning big. But, also if they do win big, we got to hold their feet to the fire too, that the job's not
Yeah,
just because
we
you won
got to
an
hold them
election,
accountable.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think the big reason why we have to work together is so that way we can come up with better solutions. We can also get to these problems faster, right? If we're gonna have that's 3 years from now, three and a half years from now. But if we start talking now with each other, with your Republican, with your Democrat, or even especially the independents too,
Independence, yeah.
we have to get everyone in this conversation so that way when the next election happens that we can really start to have deeper conversations as to okay, how can we solve a lot of the problems that are happening in this country? How can hopefully unemployment is not high 3 years,
Yeah.
3.5 years, right? Hopefully the price of your groceries, and your mortgage, we need a
Down.
we don't want those prices to skyrocket 3.5 years from now, otherwise it's going to be a big civil war.
Yeah, it's gonna be tough.
And so we have to reach around the aisle. And in a way, the best way to do that is we also have to be humble, right? And we have to be open
Yeah.
to what the other person is saying. And the key to I'm actually reading a book on build the life you want. And I actually met the guy today. His name is Arthur C. Brooks. It's a book on happiness. Right. If you want to live a really, truly happy life, right, you have to think external, right?
Yeah.
You have to think about how you're impacting other people. Because you could do all the stuff for yourself. You can go on Amazon, do a bunch of retail therapy, but best kind of therapy is helping people,
Yeah.
right? And it doesn't matter what their beliefs are, because someone's political beliefs is one part of them.
Yeah.
Well,
Doesn't
there's a
define
whole
who they are.
it doesn't define who they are,
Yeah.
right? And we have to come across like, okay, we're just people. We want the same thing. We want to take care of our families. How do we take care of our families? How can we make sure that our college's kids, the college for our kids is not going to be $500,000?
Is a football, exactly.
Let's also hold these colleges up to the fire. Why do they have billions of dollars in endowment and yet they don't touch it?
Yeah.
Harvard, Yale, Penn have roughly in the 30 to $50 billion in endowment. It's not even touched.
Not even touched.
That could cover tuition for everybody.
Yeah.
For the next couple of years.
But yet they still choose to charge you $75,000 to $100,000 a year to go to school there.
Yeah. And that's ridiculous.
But again, I
And
think
that's-
it goes back to, again, what you and I were talking about was greedflation. People are just so freaking greedy.
yeah, very, and I'm still so shocked at what happened with Larry Summers recently.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, are more academics? Is this going to impact, we talked about international leaders.
Yeah.
Is this going to impact academic institutions? Are there more university presidents
Nobody
doing
knows
this?
what's really in those files till they release them all.
Yeah.
It's
And,
interesting. Yeah.
I was really shocked because that was a person, I would watch a lot of his segments. He would be on Wall Street on,
Yeah.
I think it was like Bloomberg TV, and he would give his input on the market. And I'm just like, wow, well, I guess he's not smart anymore.
Pretty
I lost
intelligent guy,
memory.
but again, you know, and we don't know what people do behind closed doors. You know, that's tough. You don't know what they're up to. You know, or who they're in bed with, or who they're friends with, or you know, especially when you have money like that you can throw around and hide from a lot of things too.
And I think that's a really special kind of evil where people use that power to, manipulate,
Yeah,
to, sort of intrigue, someone of youth. That is like pure, that to me is like pure evil.
yeah,
That your power and influence should be used for not only good, but positive influence. I mean, can you imagine, for example, if you're a billionaire, you have thousand, let's say you have access to not even 1,000 million. Let's say you have access to 80 million, right? In let's say for India's an example, right? So I gave $80 to India a few weeks ago. That $80 in India would feed, I guess, it was 3 meals for 2 days.
yeah,
Give around 60 people. It's a missionaries and charity in India.
yeah.
Well, let's also think about America, for example. Let's say you want to feed people in North Philadelphia. Right. I stayed in Philadelphia for 2 years. You want to feed people in North Philadelphia, right? How much is that going to cost? So how much would it cost to actually help rebuild North Philadelphia? Some
North
parts of
Philly,
North Philadelphia,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So out of that 80 million, what if you contributed, let's say, maybe 2 to 3 million?
yeah,
That could be monumental,
yeah.
right? And there are more places, I'm sure, in
You've
in
changed it. You know?
you know parts of New York,
Yeah,
and in fact, there's a big discrepancy in New Haven, Connecticut, right where Yale University is. Yale University, all a bunch of, I mean, nothing against the students there, right? But there's a lot of wealth there,
yeah.
and then you have New Haven, Connecticut, the other side. They're
Yeah.
people are not they're not rich. They're
They're
you
really
know
poor, yeah, you know, and that's I think, you know, I forget who I was talking to last week about it, you know, think about I talk about Boston, for instance. We have a lot of, like, developers that come in and they're buying these single family homes and tearing them down and putting up 5 or 6 units in the place where the single family home was, right? So, why not, as a city, attach a certain fee to it that, okay, if you're gonna buy a single family home and tear it down and turn it into 2 units, you gotta pay X amount per unit that goes to the city to maybe fund a local school. Or if you're gonna do
Mhm.
3, it costs X amount of money. You're gonna do 4, it costs X amount of money. 5, it's gonna cost you're gonna do 6, cost X amount of money. So and it goes up as more units that you build. But right now, where you're selling units, you could buy a single family house for $1,000,000 and you're selling a unit per se for 750,000 times 6. They're
Mhm.
making X amount of money and nothing's going back. Yeah, you know, taxes and all that. Attach a small fee that can, you know, maybe attach a small fee that goes to the local food bank.
Yes. Yeah.
Small little things that we could change. We're not decision makers, you and I, policy makers, you and I, but if we can come up with small ideas like that, why can't the people that are being paid to do this down in DC come up with some strong ideas like, you know, small things that could change the face of a nation, that could change the face of a community, that could change one less person going to bed hungry, you know, one less family that can keep the lights on today. Yeah, there's so many
Oh, absolutely. Especially now, people need all the help now.
yeah,
The employment on the rise. Especially Thanksgiving coming up. That'd be a great idea actually to do something for a lot of those families. That's a really good idea. And we can, after the pod, we could definitely talk about finding ways to, help some families throughout this
yeah.
Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
Um,
help and give back, no doubt about it.
'Cause
So, what did you learn? I know you had, Madeline Albright was one of your professors.
yes, yeah.
What
That
was she
was
like, and, you know, how smart was she?
It is her class is like drinking from a fire hydrant,
Yeah.
right? It is just a wealth of knowledge, and I made sure when I was in class, I was sitting at the very front. I wanted to make sure that she at least saw me. Imposter syndrome is real,
Yeah.
right? I was like, you know what? Even though I feel imposter syndrome, I'm gonna put myself. I want to make sure that when she's giving a lecture, she's looking right at my face. She knows exactly who I. I just wanted that. I just
Yeah,
wanted that, and I mean, she's absolutely brilliant. Even at that age, she just had such a wealth of knowledge, and there was no pause. Like there was no pauses. She wouldn't stutter. It was just a
straight through.
flow. Great storyteller. Also, she had this aura when she walked in the room, and this was the first time. Like if you see a celebrity, or even some politicians, they might have a little bit of, but she had just like this presence,
Yeah,
and you're just like, but it's a different kind of presence. It's not like, oh my gosh, she's famous. It's more of like out of respect. Like, okay, this,
respecting, yeah.
like, oh wow, like I'm really honored.
Yeah,
And what was great is when I was writing this book, her guests were really instrumental in me writing this book, and that I had she brought in the former director of the CIA. She brought in a couple senators, and that was really impactful for my book. I was like, okay, I don't have to go and search for these people.
She definitely has that Rolodex.
She has. So I was like, I interviewed her, and I interviewed pretty much when they came to class. I'm like, I'm just going to ask some questions here, and a lot of them were really cool. They were like, a lot of those politicians were like, hey, don't worry about what I'm gonna say right here is what I'm gonna say. I'm not gonna go back to my team, whatever. I said what I said. Like, oh, I respect that. Respect that.
So
See,
who else were some of the politicians that you interviewed?
Ned Price, I believe he was the State Department spokesperson. There was a couple governors. I also, well, actually, an event that she hosted led me to meet Governor George Allen, who was a Republican from Virginia.
Yeah.
And he actually gave me a blurb for my second book. But meeting him, right? Again, just reaching across aisles. I didn't say I'm Democrat or Republican, but I would put myself in every. I met him at a Republican networking event.
Yeah.
He was cool, and we talked about rugby, right? Because
Yeah.
his father coached. I believe his father coached rugby. His father actually no, his father actually was the coach of the Washington football team
Oh,
at
okay.
the time, the
Yeah.
Redskins at the time. And so we just talked football. We talked football. We talked rugby, and it's like it doesn't. Even though maybe we might see things politically different,
Yeah.
we had a lot of common denominators.
Yeah.
Right. And then eventually those common denominators, turns out we had a lot of similarities and common denominators with politics too.
Exactly. Well, like I said to you, I think that's the hottest thing people don't realize. Republicans and Democrats, we have more that unites us than divides us. And we don't realize that, If we just listen to each other, we'd be better off,
And that's a danger, I think, with social media, especially with TikTok, right? It's not necessarily a conversation. It's like kind of like a monologue, right? It's someone just spewing out what they're thinking, which is, I mean, look, freedom of speech, like all the
Yeah.
power to you. But I think it'll be more beneficial to have a conversation and not like in a debate setting, more of like let's shoot the shit. Like
you and I are doing right now. Just have a conversation. Just talk.
yeah, not everything has to be in a debate, or like, let me prove like, you know what? I don't know the answer to life.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I say it all the time, right? If you're on the other side and you're a Republican and I'm a Democrat, and we can have a conversation, right? And you can change my mind on some issues. That's what
Mhm.
politics is all about, But
Yeah.
if you're that strong in your belief and you can change my mind, who's a Democrat, or I can change your mind if you're a Republican, then look, democracy's working. That's what democracy
Yeah.
is,
Yeah.
It's not just shutting down and pointing your finger and yelling, "No, you're wrong." No, listen. Let's listen. Let's have that conversation.
Mhm.
That's gone
Yeah,
out the
good.
window with politics nowadays.
Yeah, and I think, but we need to find a way. I think conversations like this is going to be helpful
Yeah.
because we can slowly get people back into, hey, isn't this like more fruitful for you? Isn't this better? All right, because I think the debate structure and just the constant yelling and one-sidedness they're going to get tired of it.
Yeah.
It's exhausting to hear, right? And
Oh,
it's
yeah.
like, hey, it's something refreshing, which is
Yeah, it
let's have
turns
more.
you off,
Oh,
it turns you off if you're listening to that or watching it. Must at some point you must be like, "Yeah, I've had enough of this."
yeah, and people already have enough problems in their life. Like, why add to like the division? Why add to like the negativity? Time is uncertain, right? They say life is short. Time is also uncertain. So it's best to make the most out of what we can, and it's too precious to waste it on divisive politics and politicians that don't really give a rat's ass about us.
Oh, you
You
and
know?
I, exactly.
Yeah.
That's what people don't realize. Everyone thinks, oh, the most politicians are down there doing the work for the people. And, it's few and far between. There's a lot of them aren't down there just, to do great for their constituents or for you and I. They're down there to make some money, to make some connections, to make some extra money. And they really don't care about you and I. And the only time they really do care about you and I is when it's election season and they need a check or a donation.
Exactly.
Oh.
Just continuing to ask for money, and it's just like, "Hey, look, we're trying to get our own money. We need money for
Exactly.
we need money for our own families."
So you talk about listening as a civic duty, but what do you say to people who feel listening to the other side is enabling harm?
That's a great question. I think if listening is not working, what you can do is be a guide, right? Yeah, okay, listening may not be working, so let me ask some questions and then come from a place of curiosity.
Yeah.
And then start to be interested, because the good thing about curiosity is now you're in a position of being a student. You're a student of life, right? You're always going to be a student no matter what. Just because you're not in the classroom, doesn't mean still take notes, right? Just come from a place like, okay, let's say you meet someone who is on the far left or the far right. Okay, isn't it interesting of why someone would be that far?
Yeah.
Like, why are they that far?
Yeah.
What persuaded, like, what was their research like? What was their moment of, what, this is a huge part of my identity.
Yeah.
And that's important because again, we're in America especially, right? There's this big proclivity for attaching brands as part of identity, right? Let's say you like to go to Starbucks all the time,
Yeah.
right? That's part of brand identity. If you're a fan of a certain football team, that's a part of your brand identity.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing with politics, right? Someone says, "Hey, I'm a Republican," but attaching or you're a hardcore democratic socialist,
Yeah.
that's now attached to your identity. So why is that? What is that really? What is that really saying? And let's go deeper. Like, what else is a part of your identity?
Yeah.
Democratic socialism, or you're a MAGA supporter, if those are part of your identity, what's the entire pie chart here?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What's the percentage, right?
Yeah.
At the other percentages. Yeah. And then so you might see, okay, there might be far left or far right. But that could be 30% of that chart. 60% could be maybe it's given to people.
Yeah.
And then 20% could be like their family or their dog, so it's like looking at the rest of that chart and then figuring out, okay, I have a lot of common ground here,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then that is when you start saying, okay, you're not the brand, right? You're more than like maybe you're more than a Buffalo Bills fan.
Yeah.
You're also a humanitarian,
Yeah.
so it's just going past that initial identity
Yeah.
and then figuring out who is David, right? Who is Josh? Who is Samantha? Like,
Yeah.
let's get to who you really
Who
are.
you really are. Exactly. Yeah. And I think the
Yeah.
hottest part, too, becomes since when did we, all of a sudden, did it become cool to be like, I'm a Republican or I'm a Democrat or I'm a MAGA or I'm, we in politics, it was never like, the cool thing, I remember, what are we talking? So Trump 4 year, 8. So 10, 12 years ago, it wasn't cool to talk politics. Nobody wanted to, now it's like everybody wants to talk about it. And it's like, and the hottest thing for me becomes with the, we were in New York City, my brother and I, a couple of years ago, and he met one of the guys that works, that's a worker down there. My brother got to know him, and we were talking to him, and he goes, say you go into the hospital and you're having heart surgery, and
Mhm.
you look at the doctor and say, "Hey, are you a Republican?" And I was like, "No." And he goes, "Okay." And he goes, "So your house is on fire." And then you call the fire department. Do you ask the captain that's coming to the house, "Are you a Republican?" And if he is, do you turn him away? No, you don't. And he goes, "Yeah. So why does it matter if you're Republican or Democrat? Why do we define each other or define ourselves like that? And for me, it's like, I don't know, when did it become cool all of a sudden that everybody's destined and bound for DC with political talk and everything else, It's
Well, I love those examples too. I really like that. That's pretty good.
so
You
true
know,
though. It's like, yeah, you say you have a heart attack and they're ushering you in, you ask the doctor, "Yeah, you're a Republican? I don't want you to work on me." It's like, no, that political affiliation goes up,
I like
you know?
just say hello.
So
Yeah.
do you think that both parties bear equal responsibility for the current level of political dysfunction? If not, who bears more?
Now that is a really phenomenal question. Now I want to say it's sort of progressed over time, but I think this particular administration, and I'm not saying it because like the Republican or anything like that. It's just this particular administration has caused the most division by far. I
Yeah.
think they act specifically on diversity, equity, and inclusion as like a priority was rather strange because it's resulted in people losing their jobs, and that should not be a priority for example at all.
And
And
it's almost like he trumpets that when it happens, like he's excited about it,
yeah, and it's like there's nothing great about Americans losing a job. That's
not at all.
regardless of what party they are. Like,
I never thought about DEI this way, right? So I had a young girl on, she's 32 years old. She runs a nonprofit for children with disabilities, right? And she was telling me she has this sensory room out in Oregon that she started and she pays for. But in February, because of the DEI, they cut it off, the funding. There's no money for people and children and families with kids with special needs because it got cut out. got cut out because they eliminated it. And I didn't know that, So her nonprofit now had to go to a for-profit because she has to now raise money to get certain things. And it's just things you don't think of that, if you and I don't know about it, sure as hell, I don't think Trump, sat there and was like, yeah, we're going to get rid of all this. And just the repercussions of shit that they're doing, that's
Mhm.
hurting everyday average Americans.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the only ones benefiting, it seems, are what? The rich and powerful.
Yeah. And that is really unfortunate, right? And how much worse is it gonna get for the people?
Yeah, yeah. Because we're only what, 10 months in? 9 months in? 10 months? If
Yeah.
this is gonna be the first 10 months, the first year is supposed to be the roadmap to what the rest of the 3 years is gonna be like. Well, what the hell is it gonna be like if everybody's losing their jobs and there's no money and bills can't be where are we going?
It's gonna be really big chaos, right? And slowly, there are some people a part of his administration that are they're making the Wall Street. I think one of them is I want to be careful with my words. Is I have a little bit of a connection, but I would say some figures in the administration are rather controversial. They've been on the Wall Street Journal
Yeah.
frequently, and now I think that's going to really implode pretty soon. Once the implosion happens, I'll tell you who it is and all that. But it's and this is just like calling for what it is. Like if the administration was doing a great job, I would say they're doing a great job, and I would
Yeah.
say like, you know what, maybe I was wrong in my initial estimate,
Yeah.
But calling it and seeing what I've seen and reading from what I've read, it's not looking good.
No.
It's dividing people. And It is hurting people. Eventually, it's going to hurt everybody.
Yeah. And it's not
Except
just
if
the
I'm doing-
rhetoric. It's not just his rhetoric either that's hurting people. It's the policies that they're cutting. It's everything that they're doing that. But unfortunately, like we had the conversation before we started recording, is he told everybody this is what he was going to do.
This is exactly
He told
how, and
everybody.
it's frustrating because a lot of politicians they would say they're going to do something and they don't do it. He'll be saying what he wants to do, but it's not what we wanted.
Exactly.
So he's like,
know?
oh my gosh, like can we have politicians who say what they want to do, but it's like for the benefit of the
Of the
majority of
common
them?
good of the majority of Americans. So,
Yeah.
so what do you think is the most uncomfortable truth you found out about Democrats during your research, and what about Republicans as well?
I would say throughout my research, even after the book, what I had a big problem with the Democrats was what rubbed me the wrong way was when the President Biden at the time and Kamala Harris, when they won initially. And I remember they were like from ear to ear, they're smiling. And I understand they won the presidency and things like that, but it seemed like a job finished, job well done.
Yeah.
And for me, it rubbed me the wrong way because I'm thinking, no, the job just got started. This is
Exactly.
where the work begins,
Yeah.
right? And I feel like they sort of allowed MAGA to exist, to
Yeah.
continue existing while they were, I don't know, even know what they were doing,
Yeah.
right? Throughout the 4 years, like it's hard to pinpoint exactly what they really accomplished. But Trump was out there throughout the entire country. He was continuing to campaign.
Yeah.
So he was been campaign. You wonder how he won. He was campaigning for 4 years.
Yeah.
Versus Kamala Harris, when she was given the nominee, she had roughly, I believe, like 6 months, 6 to 8 months,
Yeah.
if anything. But so you
Days, I think it was 116 days that she had.
that's not gonna, yeah, exactly, and that's not gonna beat
No.
almost 4 years of nonstop campaigning, right? I think the Democrats have just lost their footing, right? And they've become complacent.
Yeah.
And I think the new rise of, democratic socialism, I think that they can be good in it, but at the same time, they have to be careful of using anger. There's one study, I have a paper of that study, but what Trump and the Democratic socialist movement have in common is that they're using anger
Yes.
to mobilize and galvanize their constituents,
Yeah.
and that's dangerous. You shouldn't be using anger
At all.
to galvanize people. You need to be instilling. This is why I like Obama. It's like instilling things like hope, right?
Yeah.
You do need something positive to look up to look forward to, a sense of optimism, but structured optimism.
Yeah.
Right? Not just, oh yeah, everything's gonna be kumbaya, but we want to eventually get to a goal, but you have to set that goal and then have like a framework in order to get there.
Yeah.
So that was my issue with the Democratic side. With the Republican side, I think they've deviated from, like, I like Mitt Romney, for example,
Yeah.
right? If he was running against Hillary Clinton, I would have voted for Mitt. I actually really liked him, but this new MAGA movement, I think they've become a new entity, and it is completely. I don't know what this entity is. I think they are technically a Republican just by the branch, but
Yeah.
I don't think they're a Republican. I think they're just a new morphed party, and it's creating a lot of division. And I think for the Republicans, they need to get back to who they were.
Who they were, yeah.
That's like it sort of went off on the deep end with MAGA. Let's go back to, more of a centrist approach. Let's go back to, their Republicans are really famous for their policies and economics, right?
Yeah.
Get back to the economics.
Yeah,
of
fiscally
things.
responsible, all that.
Yeah. Use data. Use
Yeah.
numbers.
Yeah.
I think they
But
need to
one of
get
the
back to
one of the biggest things too, though, is that I think that, unfortunately, I don't think the MAGA party, as I like to call them, is going anywhere. And I think a lot of the Republicans are afraid to speak out against it because right now with Trump, take Marjorie Taylor Greene, for instance, right? Who would have thought
Mhm.
that she would have been the, common sense Republican? I never thought that. I never thought she.
I was shocked. Yeah.
Now what happened? Trump said, we're going to vote her out. We're going to get her out of there. We're going to put all of our money behind her. But it's like, that's what happens now in politics, unfortunately. If you speak out against the establishment, which is Trump right now, he's going to get rid of you. He's going to get friggin'. But imagine that, a Republican telling another Republican, we're going to vote you out.
That is
It's crazy.
wild. It's really wild.
And the Republicans go along with it. They're like, okay, okay, Mr. President, like, we're okay with that. Like, no. When's someone going to stand up to him from the Republican Party and be like, besides Marjorie Taylor Greene, stand up and be like, hey, enough's enough. Let's fucking stop with the bullshit. He reminds me of like a little kid when you take away their friggin' wiffle ball and tell them it's time for bed. It's like he pouts and he screams and he yells and it's like he just gets worse by the day. Like
Absolutely.
3
Absolutely.
years of it.
What I'm really worried about, this is like almost a bigger nightmare than, believe it or not, it's this. Now there's like a pathway into becoming a very, very dangerous dictator. Now, I think eventually there'll be chaos, but I think we'll be okay.
Yeah.
But in future administrations, we need to change some things around. Otherwise, we can have the potential of a real intelligent dictator. Someone who is, and it could be on either side.
Yeah.
That is my guess, but it can be on either side. But someone who has a framework and knows from day one what they want to do, and they are ruthless. I'm reading a biography of Mao Zedong, a Chinese dictator, and
Chairman
he was
Mao, Red Book,
calculated.
the Red Book, yeah.
Yeah, and very calculated. Let's see. Oh, here it is. Yeah, nice thick book, but very calculated. Loves to read, right? And it's just like that worries me. Like down the road, when our grandkids are voting,
Yeah.
that someone sees a blueprint that's been carved out
Yeah.
and says, you know what, I'm going to make use of the executive, and I'm going to show what a real dictator can be, and that to me really terrifies. So I think after the Trump presidency, whenever that is, right? But after the Trump presidency, I think we really have to find ways that no executive, no president should have this much power.
Yeah. Well, and I think the way it was set up is there's supposed to be checks and balances, but unfortunately, nobody wants to friggin' hold them accountable or give the checks and balances to them. Nobody
Yeah.
wants to do any of that but again, like you said, think of it this way. Imagine if President Trump had a brain.
Yeah.
Dangerous he could really be.
That is really terrifying. I mean, right now he's on the latter age of life.
Yeah. It's him 20 years ago at 60. He might have been around forever. I often say it, and I don't make a joke about this. I honestly think that if President Trump got on the TV tonight and said, "Hey, to all my followers, I shipped out a package to all of you, and it contains a blue pill, and I need you all to take it because it's going to make America great again, and it's going to make our party so great that they would take it, right? And if there was poison in there, he could probably kill 50 million Americans because they would do it.
Yeah.
And that's where I think we've lost our way in politics where, I've never seen anything like it. I mean, I read, and I'm not comparing Donald Trump to JFK. I'm not at all. Not at all. But I'm just saying the way they were able to garner their following, right? I haven't seen a following like that since Kennedy, where the country fell in love with somebody, because believe it or not, half this country loves Donald J. Trump. They really do,
Oh, absolutely. When I was initially writing the book, and I'm in the East Coast, right? And it's largely blue.
Yeah.
And then I visited South Carolina, where we went to a beach trip, and I saw there were billboards, everything was Trump, and motorcycles.
The boats
with
coming
Trump.
by with the flags.
Yeah, and that's a reality check. That was like, he's gonna win. he's gonna win. Hillary doesn't have this. I've never seen that Hillary billboard in my life. And
Never.
yet, being in the South, I'm like, okay, wow, this is gonna be big.
Yeah.
And that was a shock. And not to say that, wrong or right or whatever, but it was like sort of a big shock of
Oh yeah.
seeing, okay. We
Democrats
can
in 2016 took him for granted, laughed it off. He won. And then what do you do? Like you said, one of his biggest things was for 4 years, he's on every news cycle after he lost. He's on every news station, every news cycle, every social media. He's everywhere, right? Whether it's his team or whether it's the news or the media keeping him in the spotlight. He doesn't go away, right? Every night
Mhm.
somewhere. And then it comes
Yeah.
to the election and, Biden can't do it anymore. He steps aside and she has 116 days to run a campaign. Well, yeah, you can have all the money in the world, but 116 days ain't going to cut it, you know?
Another big reason why I think the Democrats lost a lot of their voters is they need to be more patriotic. They
Hey,
need to, for example, I have an American flag right in this room, right? And that could be perceived right now as like, oh, are you like a Republican? No, are you a Trump
exactly.
guy? And it's like you need to bring back like healthy patriotism.
Yeah, yeah. It's okay to be patriotic. It's and I say it all the time. Like people get upset. And I was talking to a couple guys at work, and one guy was like, "Yeah, one of my biggest issues was the border and border control." And I'm like, "Yeah, I understand what you're saying." And some guy was like, "You're racist." And I go, "What do you mean he's racist?" I go, "He's as an American, he's worried about the border. There's nothing racist about that." People want a
Mhm.
safe and secure border. But
Yeah.
think about the age that we live in, right? 2025. You could have terrorists sneaking in. You could have, we obviously have a drug epidemic in this country, and it's not manufactured here and made here. Mostly, it's shipped in. So we have drugs coming in. We have so much coming in across the border. What about if someone snuck in a weapon of mass destruction? Well, border security is big, but that doesn't make you racist. It doesn't make you, you hate immigrants. No, it just makes you're an American. A lot of people get mad because of some people now are coming to the fact of like, why do we have to support Israel so much? Why do we have to support Ukraine so much? Why can't we just support America? Right? I'm all for supporting America. I never thought of it that way because I've always looked at as America as being the leading, shining, the shining example of freedom. In that the way we've always done it is we've always policed the world. We've always been the, protector of the world per se, right?
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
but, you know, maybe Trump's trying to do less of that and try to bring it home. But it's tough to try to say Trump's doing this or Trump's doing that because it's like I could say one thing and give President Trump praise right now, right? And then tomorrow he's going to go out and do something and people are just going to rub it in my face for the next 100 days.
Yeah.
Because whenever I talk positive about him, it's like he does something major fuck up and people like, see, you support him. And it's like, nope, I don't support President Trump. I don't wish any ill will on President Trump. He's the president of the United States of America. The way I look at it is if he does great things, we'll all be great. We'll all, if he does good, if there's great policies, great economic policies, we should be doing well. Every American should be. We should all be benefiting from it, not just a select few.
Yeah,
If the
exactly.
president's doing well, we should all be doing well.
As long as wearing like a MAGA hat, like they have every right to.
Yeah.
They shouldn't no violence should be, you know,
No.
they shouldn't be like punished or anything like that. Like they have every right to wear what they want to wear.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. That doesn't bother me. Just like the same instance, take it for instance, if somebody's wearing a hat with the gay flag on it, or somebody
yeah.
flies a gay flag, that don't bother me. That's your freedom. That's your freedom.
Oh,
The only thing the only thing I know I don't like nowadays is people love to hide behind freedom of speech when it comes to hate speech.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah, that's true.
it's
It's very
convenient
true.
for them. And people will tell you, "Well, suck it up. It's freedom of speech." That's bordering on friggin' criminal, and it's just like. But again, there's so much out there nowadays with social media, cell phones, and everything. Don't think there's a lot of people out there that are doing these things just for clicks, just so they can make money, just so they can have an aha moment or they can go viral. Pretending that they're this or they're that. When in reality they don't believe that stuff. In America we should be believing in our neighbors. We
Yes.
should be believing in our community. We should be believing in our state, and we should be believing in this country that my legacy is with no kids that if I can do one great thing and leave a small little ripple throughout this country or throughout this community that I live in when I go, that somebody else can leave a ripple or two ripples or three ripples that can, help the community, that can be a good thing for the community, because we love this country. Oh, there's no other greater
Oh, yeah,
country in
this
the
is
world.
not only is this the land of opportunity, this is the land of second chances.
Yeah.
You can completely screw up, but guess what? You'll still get another chance. In fact, this is a country of many chances,
Many
right?
chances. Exactly. Yeah.
That's tough. That is, no other country is that possible, right? In China, they have, I forgot the name of the test, but they have like their own SAT. If you do poorly on this SAT, that is your occupation. So
Yeah.
if you do poorly, you're going to be a barista.
The
That's
rest of your life.
you,
Yeah.
you
Ooh,
know,
that's
and
crazy. That's, and I think that people need to realize that our country, right? That, United States of America, we are the melting pot. People came here seeking religious freedom. People came here seeking, refugee from, war-torn countries. And we've always been that country that, welcomes with open arms. But when all of a sudden have we stopped? When did we stop welcoming people with open arms? And now we are telling people, go back to where you came from, go back. Like what are we doing? What are we doing?
it's American, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, when I think of America, I think of like the New Yorks, the Bostons,
Yeah.
even the Philadelphias. Like it's a melting pot.
Yeah. Look, I remember Ronald Reagan saying, and I said it on one of my other podcasts, Ronald Reagan got a letter, I think it was his last address to the nation or last press conference, and it was some guy thanking him for his service and being president. And the guy wrote, you can go to France, but you can't become a Frenchman. You can go to China, but you can't become Chinese. And he said, America is the only place where you can go to America and become an American.
Yes. Yes.
True. Like, if that doesn't make you smile to think that people want to come here because they love this country or they love the freedom, just think about across the world. There's some places in the world right now where women still can't drive, where women can't vote, that where women are suppressed, where, gay people are suppressed. Think about living in a world like that. We live in a free world here,
Yeah. And even right now, like we can talk about anything on this podcast.
without fear of retribution, without fear of censorship. That's the great thing about our country. And if people looked at those small little things that we take for granted, they'd be like, wow, this country really is great.
Yeah. And there, when I was in Australia, right, and my father experienced this, like there is such thing as open racism. And open racism is very different from, I think, what Americans are exposed to when it comes to race. I think a lot of the racism here is like, I mean, it exists, but over there, there's no like you can't really complain about it. You just have to
Take it.
you just you just have to take it, right? You can't like complain to like the organization or the boss, like, hey, like they call me a certain slur. It's like
Yeah.
there's no judge and jury. You just have to,
And that's in Australia. That's crazy.
yeah. And I can't imagine what's happening now. I think it's getting a little bit worse, but it's still a beautiful country, and still there are a lot of great people there.
Yeah.
There's still that element that exists
It
when it
seems
comes to
like
the
archaic,
and
like Stonehenge type shit.
you just
Because
gotta
think about it, like to be racist, right? Or even make racist comments or, you have to have some type of hate inside of you to
yeah,
talk to people like that. Like it's just tough because, we are very lucky enough to come from the greatest country in the world, you know, where we can
100%.
pursue, like look behind you, all the books that you have, right? There's some countries where some of those books are banned. Unfortunately in this country, there are some books now that are starting to be banned. But, we really do, where you could go and you could pursue higher education. There's some places in some countries where you can't pursue a higher like you wrote a book, you wrote two books.
America.
And it's
Yeah.
just like this country's great. Like we need to start looking at it that way and going over and having the conversations with our neighbors and the conversations with the community and just getting back to the nuts and bolts of loving one another, picking each other up when we fall and not worried about, hey, you a Republican or Democrat, just worried about, hey, we're all Americans and we're all in this together.
Exactly.
You know?
If we travel, right? Let's say we travel to another country, right? We're gonna be seen as American. They're not gonna see us, oh, like, a white or a brown or a black, like, see, like, oh, wow, they're 4 Americans.
Exactly. Not Republican Americans or Democrat American, we're Americans.
Yeah.
And I'd love to travel like that, where someone says, "Oh, they're Americans," and I could say, "Yeah, we're the greatest country in the world, but I appreciate your hospitality and coming in." I had a guy on Wesley Farnsworth who was a photographer in the military, right? And one of the misconceptions that we talked about, he spent a lot of time in Afghanistan being a photographer. And, I always heard on the news that the Afghan people were bad people and they were all terrorists and they're all bad people. And he told me every village he went into, every village elder that he met, always offered him tea and food.
Wow.
Always welcomed him with the kids welcomed them in with open arms. He said the Afghan people were some of the nicest people he's ever met.
Really? That's
And for
that's
years,
beautiful to
we
hear.
were
That's
told on the
beautiful.
news that they were all bad people, that they were all terrorists, that they all hated America,
Nope, the nicest people, delicious food.
nicest people. Yeah, I forget what he said. There was this certain dish that he ate. It was lamb on top, but it was like rice with raisins. But
Ooh.
they like cooked the raisins, so it like got real sweet. He said, and then they put the lamb on it. He said it was the best ever. But he said they were the nicest people in the world. And I said, well, I've always been told by the media that. And he goes, that's the problem. The media, the media, the media.
It shines them in a very different, very poor light.
Poor light. Because I said to him, one of the hottest things for me was just think about 20 years we spent there trying to make sure the Taliban didn't come back into power, right? And as well as I do, if you read history and you look at it, that the Taliban was taking seizing power back once we left, right?
Oh, yeah.
So we were stuck
Yeah.
in a rut of, hey, are we going to spend X amount of billions of dollars or millions of dollars a year to stay there, or are we going to get out of here? But then to me, it's more like the war. At the end of it, the war wasn't lost or won. The war on terror still exists. It's always going to
Mhm.
exist. As long as there's hate in this world, the war on terror is going to exist. And I'm not talking about Islamic terror. I'm talking about all terror, all terror, like we have, people don't look at it this way, like mass shootings we have in the States over here in America. I consider that terrorism. It's a form of domestic,
It is.
you know,
That's definitely terror.
and if you start charging these gangs, right, with domestic terrorism, you may slow down a lot of these gun violence and these big shootings and these massive shootings, because if you are able to not change the law, because you could charge them as domestic terrorists, do that, you would have maybe less kids that would say, hey, I'm not doing that, because that's an automatic 45 freaking 50 years in jail. These
Yeah.
gangs and these groups. So we got a couple more questions. I feel like I feel like we could talk all night.
Oh, absolutely.
But I'm definitely
Absolutely.
gonna have you come back on. We can definitely come back on, talk politics whenever.
Absolutely, I would love to.
Yeah, definitely. I got a couple more questions. If you could put one bipartisan policy on the national agenda tomorrow, fully funded, politically supported, guaranteed to pass, what would it be and why?
That is a phenomenal question. I would say really going sort of echoing about gun violence, right? And I actually do really I'm a big proponent of the Second Amendment. I think we have the right to bear arms
Yeah,
and protect yourself. But I think we need a way in which like some of these people should not be able to they shouldn't have access. It's like the same way, you're driving a car, right? It's not necessarily like just because you're an American doesn't mean you're automatically able to, you have to go through a test. So
yeah.
we need to have some sort of legislation in which it's almost as if it should be as easy as it is right now.
That-
Not necessarily an expert on this topic, but I mean, the kids that are dying, and no one should have. And I was talking to a former Marine, and we were talking about the subject, and he said, if you gave me, I think it was an AR-15 or M16, you don't need training. You don't need like
Yeah, you
basic
just need
camp,
bullets.
training. You can just fly it up and you can kill 20 or 30.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you get someone who is trained.
You're talking damage, exactly. Well, and I think what you're trying to get at is that there needs to be, whether it's background checks, which they do, but close the gun show loopholes. And also one of the biggest things I think is that there should be a mandatory, whether it's 6 months, 8 months training, right? On
Mhm.
gun safety, how to use your gun. And I like to say this all the time, and people always laugh at me. And I say, when they did the right to bear arms, right, when they wrote it into the Constitution, right, you got to remember though, they were talking about muskets, right?
They weren't talking about
They weren't talking about the guns that we have nowadays. So I always tell people, and I could give or take the Second Amendment, but it is part of the Constitution, so it doesn't really bother me. Like, I think if you want to have a weapon and you're in a state to carry, and say you work late at night and you need to stay safe, I understand that. Or if you want to have a shotgun in your house to stay safe, if an intruder came in, no doubt about it. Well, we don't need weapons of war. We don't need AR-15s. We don't need any of those guns, and it's crazy now to think of like ghost guns where people can print them now, like,
Oh yeah, 3D.
you know,
That's
yeah. And one of the things I'm learning is they have these things, clock switches that they're called, and they're 3D printed and they sell them and they put them on a Glock, which makes it semi-automatic. So it can,
goodness.
instead of having to hit the trigger every time to fire a bullet, you just hit it and it just automatically fires. And they're made of friggin' plastic. They're popping up here in Boston. They've been in a couple of stories that I covered in season 1. Yeah, it's freaking crazy.
It would be hard to do that. Almost impossible.
It's weird, like technology is just like it's almost becoming like the Matrix, like some weird stuff's going on.
Yeah. I think realistically, if they want to have a bipartisan topic that they can easily sort of combine with, guns will take a very long time. But if you want something immediate, I would say definitely put some guardrails around artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
Before it gets crazy.
Yeah.
Because it is already just surpassed our expectations so fast. I think they can easily work together and sort of put some policy guardrails for companies. So that way, one, you can't just like replace people and be like, oh yeah, we're just gonna use AI from now on. That's just reckless. But also we need to think about the next presidential election. You can just create videos and this looks so realistic. It is going to be probably difficult to,
Cipher what's
think of
real,
the definition of character. You'd be like, hey, that's you. That's you right there. I'm like, nice. So we got to find a way to protect ourselves from AI, not letting AI just take over before.
And I think one of the big things you can do, right? And I think the problem with AI is nobody wants to talk about it because nobody has a solution. You know what I mean? That's the hottest part. But I think one of the things that you do is like take like Stop and Shop or a local grocery mart or a Target or wherever now that's going away from having cashiers and they're all going to, the self-checkout lines, the AI doing all that stuff. Well, you know what? If you want to start using all that AI technology in your business, and we're gonna tax you at 80%.
Yeah.
People are gonna be like, what do you mean you got tax? Yeah, we're taxing. You want to use AI? Taxing you 80%. Okay, well, we're not gonna use AI then. You know what I mean?
That's a pretty good idea.
You can stop it right there in its tracks, but like I said, one of the biggest things, nobody wants to talk about it because nobody has a solution. And I don't think, it's scary because it's been around for a while now and nobody knows, what to do with it. How to, not stop it because it's technology. There's always going to be advancements in that, but how do we slow it down? Especially when it pertains to coming into the workforce, coming into everyday life. It's tough. It's tough.
And it's funny because a lot of the C-suite people might lose their job. They don't control it. They're going to lose their jobs, because you might just need one person at the top.
Yeah, and think about think about Starbucks or think about Dunkin' Donuts where you get your local coffee. Like you could go in technically, right? With AI, you could definitely hook the stuff up and you go up to the counter, right? And you scan you tap your card, you type in what you want. Next thing you know, the machine makes itself and you go over and you pick it up. There's so many things right now that it's just it's scary. It really is. So we got 2 more questions. So what role should institutions like Georgetown play in training the next generation of political leaders?
That is a really solid question. Let's see. I would say they need to. So what I liked about Georgetown is it gave me a foundation of curiosity. It taught me how to be curious. I think that is a very good pillar, right? And I think if you're trying to have politicians, yes, you do need a level of curiosity. I think the next part is a level of how to understand people that are different from you, right? Because if you're a politician, you're going to be talking to people who are extremely different, have extremely diverse backgrounds. Even if you didn't grow up wealthy, you're going to have to speak to wealthy people. Well, I think they need to find ways of. They do a good job already. I don't know what it's like now, but I think they should have a couple classes where you're socializing. You're literally socializing. You're talking to people of different perspectives, and you're not necessarily debating, but you're talking with people. Just learning how to conversate.
Right? Having those conversations that need to be had. Yeah.
So I think that would be a great foundation. And I was actually giving this advice on. The class was called How to Become President, and my instructor at the time said, take an acting class. I was like, oh, why? And like, think about every politician. What are they doing?
Acting, no doubt about it.
And also what politicians would do is, this is when they would, if you ask them a question, they'll answer their own question. Pretty simple. It's like, they ask them like, what do you think about, gun control? What should we do about that? You know what? Guns, they're dangerous. Put in the wrong. So they're just saying like a script.
Yeah, exactly. I can tell you the one thing, dealing with a lot of politicians, I know you can definitely tell that a lot of them have a photographic memory. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Because I've talked to a few of them, like seen them during the day, and then you see them a couple days later while you're still in DC and you're shooting the shit and you haven't, you sort of go the roundabout way of asking the same question you did 3 days ago, but a different way. And then they literally like look up.
Yeah.
It's like they're flipping through the book in their head and then they're like, regurgitate the same answer, same words right to you that they just told you 3 days ago with the same script. So it's like, but there are, we have so many intelligent people that are in our politics in America that I just don't see the reason why we can't, reach across the aisle and say enough's enough, as Republicans, as Democrats. I always like to say we need to get rid of Republicans, we need to get rid of Democrats, and we all just need to be Americans.
Yeah, exactly. That's what we are.
That's it.
That's what we are.
And focus on the constituents in your district. If you're in District 9 here in Massachusetts, focus on the people in your district, the constituents. Focus on the issues that are dealing with District 9. I laughed because people were so up in arms about Mondani winning when they did the debate a couple months back. I don't know if you had saw it. They all asked him, where was the first place you would visit if you
Yeah.
they all said Israel, and he was like, I'm not visiting Israel. I'm staying here in New York City. I got work to do. And it's like, I
was really, really just surprised by that. They're all saying Israel. It was like a script.
it was, yeah. And it's like the hottest, and the crazy thing is, it's like, why Israel? Like, to me, if they were like, Jimmy, if you were elected mayor of Boston, where would you go tomorrow? I'd go to City Hall and I'd get to work.
Yeah, exactly.
I wouldn't be like, I'm going to New York City tomorrow. Well, you're not the mayor of New York. I'm going to visit New York City.
Yeah. This is a job interview.
Yeah, and unfortunately, like I said, with politics, it's becoming very, very clear that, the rich and the elite are taking over the Republican Party, the Democratic Party. I think a lot of people now are streaming that are leaving both parties, going to independence, and I think one of the biggest things we struggle with as a country that I think should be focused on a lot more is people have tried to have a third party in this country, right? They've tried. But the establishment, the Republicans and Democrats will never let it happen because it takes away from them, right? I always say, why can't we have a working party
Mm,
in the
Yeah.
United States? Regular Joes, garbage men, union workers, firefighters, cops, working people, hospital staff, doctors, everybody that does store clerks, the working party.
Yeah.
Because
I think that's
I would
they are
love to have
they are
somebody like that as my representative,
they're really what bread and butter of America. Right
Yeah,
there.
and they would know how to solve economic crises because they're at home now looking through the bills saying, all right, we got to cut this, we can cut this, but we can do this next month, and maybe we can take this trip if we cut back on this. And they're good with money,
And they've seen everything. If you think about, the people who work those jobs, they've seen all the kinds of demographics, all different kinds of wealth. They've seen wealthy people. They've seen, think about the jobs that,
Yeah,
a plumber, my friend Frankie, I mean, we're talking about it. He's like, he's been in mansions, he's
Yeah.
been in small
shitholes.
houses,
Yeah,
So you're everywhere.
and
You've
just
seen
imagine him, running for state representative, in the House of Representatives, your buddy Frankie, the plumber.
I would trust him way more
Copy,
than
But here's the problem. He'd go into DC, right? Say if he did run and he wins, his last 2 years, because they'd vote him out. They'd be like, yeah, he's trying to take away our money from the black, from the dark money. He's trying, no, we can't have him here, because it's just too DC's just too intertwined. And Trump always talks about the swamp. I don't care what he says. 99% of them, including himself, are all part of the swamp,
He likes to divorce himself from being a politician. He is a politician.
He is a politician,
He is probably more of a politician than the politicians he claims to.
No doubt about it. So we're going to bring this to a close. So Matthew, thank you for bringing clarity, courage, and conviction to a conversation that too many people have written off as impossible. Your work reminds us that American democracy has never survived on one party's strength alone. It has survived because Republicans and Democrats, generation after generation, have found a way to disagree passionately while still believing in a shared future. To everyone listening, this moment demands more from us. It demands Republicans who stand up for principle without abandoning compassion, and Democrats who fight for progress without forgetting the value of dialogue. It demands leaders who understand that patriotism isn't about choosing sides. It's about choosing country. We don't have to think the same to work toward the same horizon. We don't need perfect agreement to build a more perfect union. What we need, what Matthew challenges us to rediscover, is the will to engage, the humility to listen, and the courage to act together when the stakes are highest. So whether you wear red, white, or blue, or you're tired of both, take this as your reminder that democracy is a team sport, and America only wins when all of us shows up. So if you're fired up about protecting our democracy, expanding opportunity, and ensuring our politics reflects compassion and common sense, then get involved. Vote, organize, show up locally. Have those hard conversations, because the future of American democracy isn't predetermined. It's built by the people who care enough to fight for it. Matthew, thank you for being one of those people. And to everyone listening, stay engaged, stay hopeful, and remember, progress happens when we work together.
Oh man, thank you. Oh man, your intro and outro are amazing. Oh, please send both of you.
Oh, definitely, brother. Definitely.
Oh man, that
I-
made my both made my day. Man, that was